Welcome to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, there's been an official announcement that Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon will not be running for the presidency this time around. And since he's made his decision, his email chain has just kind of blown up. He just kind of pulls people into his little circle and starts sending them emails no matter what. Like, as I mentioned, I'm from West Virginia, not Oregon, but I got thrown in there and I just got this kind of upsurge of Jeff Merkley messages since he decided not to run. Because he wants to talk about focusing on things like taking back the Senate. But I mean, of course, that's just politics. I think he's kind of trying to bask in the spotlight now that some eyes on the nation were on him for a while. Why didn't Jeff Merkley choose to run for the presidency? Well, this is something that we had been talking about on a previous upload. I did one where we were kind of debating about whether or not Jeff Merkley would run for president, and what I said was kind of what just something that was kind of in line with most of the thinkers in America, and they were like, if Bernie Sanders does not run, Jeff Merkley might. And like it's very likely that he would have if Bernie were not running. Why is that? Because what would be the point of somebody like Jeff Merkley running for president if he's just going to be a watered down Bernie Sanders? Rocky Anderson kind of said the exact same thing about running for the Justice Party in 2016, and he was just like, Rocky Anderson, of course, the former mayor of Salt Lake City, and he's just like, Bernie is someone who's talking about the exact same issues but had more momentum. What would be the point of someone who's putting up a very similar platform but without the fan base, without the kind of popularity, without the numbers, as well as not even as extreme as Bernie is on all of the issues? So, once again, what's the point of being a watered down Bernie Sanders? Why would you want to be a more mild version of Bernie's platform? So that's why most likely Jeff Merkley decided not to run. I mean, there would be no place for him on the presidential stage. In other words, during the debates, once again, there would be no place for him in this. So, in all seriousness, in terms of political strategy, he made the right decision not to run for the presidency. The Democratic primary is going to be heating up a little bit. We're noticing a lot of support for some of the fringe candidates, if you want to call them that, such as Andrew Yang, Marianne Williamson. They've also had their own upsurge. I mean, Andrew Yang is just pulling in donations very, very quickly. Marianne Williamson is doing a lot of events and getting a lot of attention. But what does that do for somebody like John Delaney, representative of Maryland from the 6th District, who is, of course, no longer in Congress? He is a former representative, we should say. Where is John Delaney in all this? What I can say is that John Delaney has, resonated with a few people. When I look at his social media accounts, they are just barren. No one is connecting with him. I mean, if he puts out something on Instagram, yeah, maybe 68 people react to it or something like that. 65, 66, 67, 68. I mean, everybody else has, numbers that are in the thousands, like that are discussing the ideas that they're putting out, that are kind of just enjoying having these candidates in the race. What about John Delaney, the person who declared his presidential candidacy in 2017? I said very clearly from the beginning that I believe that John Delaney was only running for personal ambition, only because he wanted to try the experience of running as president. He is the sixth richest person in Congress, at least he was until January of 2019. Sixth richest person in Congress. He started two businesses. He ran for the House of Representatives 3 times and he won 3 times. And then he's just like, okay, I just want to do this because it was probably a lifelong ambition of his to try and run for the presidency. And I think he just wanted to go out, do the interviews, do the events, and then just, that's it. That's it. Full stop. That's all that John Delaney expected to achieve out of this. I'm not even sure what his role is going to be during the debates because you need 65,000 individual contributions to be on the debate stage. That's why people like Marianne Williamson and Andrew Yang were so passionate about trying to pull people into the mix. They were so passionate about trying to get supporters and donations. They're like, please just give us $1. We need 65,000 contributions. And most likely we'll see Andrew Yang and Marianne Williamson to some extent. I don't really know how they're going to do the debates with this many candidates. I mean, they normally do, a top tier, and then they do an undercard. But this they're going to be very large. We might be dealing with 11 people on the top tier debate and maybe 12 in the undercard, as the way things are going. But I don't even know what role Tom Delaney is going to be playing in this when it comes to June. It doesn't seem like he's backing down. It's just it doesn't seem like that many people are resonating with his centrist, moderate, democratic message. Well, now, back to Jeff Merkley and Bernie Sanders. If Jeff Merkley is the watered down Bernie Sanders that is choosing not to run for the presidency because, once again, he's just going to be a mild version of Bernie, kind of like a small Bernie Sanders in some light, what would be the point of having the small Bernie Sanders when you could have the real deal? Bernie seems to have an enormous amount of momentum. 77 years old, trudging through Iowa in the snow. It's like he doesn't seem like he's going to be slowing down anytime soon. And a lot of people really need to kind of just make the assessment. They need to kind of deal with the reality that Bernie Sanders could very well win this nomination. I mean, it's not only because he talks about universal health care, it's not only because he talks about education, he also signed on or endorsed or said he agrees with the concept of universal pre-K, which is something that was talked about, of course, by Julian Castro, the other former secretary of HUD who's running for the presidency as well. Bernie said he completely agreed with that. That's an excellent idea. Almost even when you're going to be talking about things like universal education, most people think about post-secondary education, college, universities, training schools, vocational education. Universal pre-K is a very good idea. There are numerous advantages to this. But when we want to deal with some other things, though, what really is going to be the outcome of the nomination process, for the Democratic Party? Who's going to be their nominee in the long run? If somebody like Jeff Merkley had run for the presidency, no chance at all. I mean, I thought he would have done it to kind of give that sort of perspective on the debate stage. If there had been no Bernie Sanders, he could be talking about these kind of. Jeff Merkley would be just a little bit far left, but somebody such as Bernie Sanders, is going to be. He's going to be tough on all of those issues. Is he going to win, though? Is somebody like Elizabeth Warren actually going to stand a chance at defeating Bernie Sanders? Because right now, the Bernie camp, the Bernie or bust individuals, they're all saying Bernie Warren 2020. They want a Sanders Warren ticket. They want Bernie Sanders on the top of the ticket, and they want Elizabeth Warren to be his running mate. When I was discussing the possibility of Elizabeth Warren becoming president with my family, this was a couple months ago, but she was already, in the mix for the presidential election of 2020. When we were discussing this, they were just saying Elizabeth Warren cannot win. She is just not that well liked. And she's definitely going to be completely alienating anyone who's going to be kind of like a centrist Republican who would think about voting for the Democrats, because she's talked about a 2% wealth tax. And I think it's only on people who have more than $50 million in assets, but it's a tax on assets. A lot of the progressives think that that's a brilliant idea. A lot of the conservatives think that that is an abomination, and the libertarians are just saying the same old taxation is theft. But I mean, it's a kind of controversial statement all the same. I mean, it's definitely going to get a big reaction from people. This 2% tax on assets, won't comment too much on that now, other than the fact that a lot of the Republicans that would be kind of pulled to the other side during the general election probably would not be pulled to Elizabeth Warren. Would they be pulled to Bernie Sanders? No, probably not as well, because of that dirty, nasty word socialism. I was listening to the CNN town hall that was hosted by Wolf Blitzer, and Bernie Sanders even corrected someone asking him a question like about socialism. He corrected her and saying democratic socialism. And I've heard Bernie talk in the past. Bernie's view of democratic socialism is not in line with what people kind of traditionally think of socialism as. And even at one of his speeches at Georgetown University back in 2015, he said very clearly, all democratic socialism means is the people in the government make decisions that benefit the people. And you don't have to agree with that. I mean, I've talked to people about that comment that Bernie made, that quote from him rather, and they're just like, Yeah, that's kind of just making stuff up to, try and charm that particular crowd in front of them. I was about to say the exact quote that someone just sort of said he was bullshitting them, but it's like a lot of people just don't want anything to do with Bernie's platform, and we're talking about those people being the right wingers, the conservatives, the Republicans, as well as the libertarians, because a lot of people view Bernie as just putting out policies that are unrealistic. I mentioned that CNN town hall with Wolf Blitzer. I know a lot of people don't like CNN, but it's like the thing is, they just kept asking him the same old questions. How are you going to pay for universal health care? What do you think about universal education? Like, we've already heard Bernie Sanders say this stuff like a bazillion times. Where are the questions like, hey, what's going on in Syria? What kind of foreign policy are you going to have toward Syria and like do something about the situation? Because Barack Obama was quite rough on Syria, and Donald Trump is actually rather involved in the Middle East, but it doesn't get exactly the certain amount of media coverage. Furthermore, even after Syria, Venezuela, where does Bernie Sanders stand on the Venezuela issue? He might have commented about it since then, but they didn't ask that at that particular town hall. Also, you want to talk about some other things? Is the relationship between the United States and Great Britain over exaggerated? Is Britain carrying too much influence over the United States' current affairs? I mean, where does he stand on foreign aid to places like Somalia? That's an entirely like pro and con, for and against issue as well. What does he think about what's going on in the Sudan? I mean, like, they don't really ask anything that's just plain different. They did ask him though, like, where do you stand on reparations for African Americans? And I believe Bernie is opposed to this, but he didn't really want to give a direct answer. A big thing we do have to remember is Bernie Sanders is a politician. People might like him. People might think that he is, going to be this political game changer. He's going to be the one who is different. He is going to be someone who is not the same old, same old. He's going to just completely change the status quo. But he's a politician all the same. And, it's like it's going back to that thing from Milton Friedman. And we did a couple uploads recently on Milton Friedman and a book that was written about him. So that's kind of why it's fresh in the mind. And it's like Milton Friedman, of course, had his very famous statement about greed, where it's like, why do you assume that greed is only financial? People can be greedy towards power, but no one would ever view Bernie Sanders as greedy because, well, he always talks about, his democratic socialist message, but at the same time, he's trying to be president. He's been involved in the political system for many times in his life, and that's not anything to trash talk him. That's not even an insult. That just means that it requires a certain amount of greed to want the presidency. It requires someone who wants a certain amount of power. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that, but we need to be honest with ourselves. And that's why, somebody like Jeff Merkley, the senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden, of course, being the other senator from Oregon, those two there, Merkley would be someone who just wouldn't win. He definitely would not. He has that political greed too, but he does not have the numbers to back it up, whereas Bernie does. Once again, Jeff Merkley would only run if like he could make sort of an impact on the debate stage. If he could talk about the Bernie Sanders platform. I mean, that's just what he would do. He'd talk about a more mild version of the Bernie Sanders platform. And Merkley has done a few more firsthand things with the immigration situation in the United States than Bernie has. And you can see this stuff all on YouTube, like Merkley's visits to the border and stuff, and he talks about some things associated with that. Some other candidates, though, haven't actually declared yet. Say a certain individual named Joe Biden. Is he going to enter the race? Or even lesser known candidates, such as Representative Tim Ryan from the 13th District of Ohio. Tim Ryan was someone who was visiting Ohio, and of course, Ohio, but Iowa is what I meant to say, Iowa, and he was doing that back in 2017, 2018. There was a very high chance that Representative Tim Ryan was going to run, and he was going to be talking all about reshaping the United States Agricultural Department. He wrote an entire book about it called The Real Food Revolution, and he's also talked about bringing in kind of mindfulness and having that taught into schools. He had a vision for the country, and he wanted to put that into a presidential platform. The problem with somebody like Tim Ryan is He wanted to capture what he called the yoga vote. That was his name. And I really didn't like that because I didn't feel it was very inclusive. What he's really talking about is kind of the sort of spiritual conscious side of Democratic voters that often gets neglected and overlooked in the political process. Like during like the political debates, you don't ever really hear people talking about things like mindfulness and spiritual education. Not talking about like religious, but just like being in touch with consciousness and meditation and all of those things. A lot of Democrats really are in line with that, especially in the 18 to 35 demographic. But the thing is, though, and you probably can even guess if what I'm going to say next if you're following the news, Marianne Williamson is already running, and this quote unquote yoga vote is definitely going to go to Marianne Williamson. I mean, that's like her area. She's not someone who wrote two books about it. She's not a U.S. congressperson. She is an outsider who comes and presents herself as a spiritual teacher who is just all about kind of these mindful practices that Tim Ryan was talking about that we just described. Furthermore, Marianne Williamson is someone who has a much larger fan base. She's written countless books. She ran for Congress in the 33rd District of California as an independent, an uphill battle, which she did not win, mind you. But then there's also going to be the possibility that she's just going to be making an impact on the debate stage. It's very unlikely that Marianne Williamson will win the presidency. But what we can say is that she's probably going to resonate with a lot of individuals. Her social media accounts are blowing up. She's building up steam. She's pulling in donations. And the same can be said about Andrew Yang, everyone's favorite venture capitalist right now. A lot of what Andrew Yang has been talking about is not only the freedom dividend, giving all adults ages 18 to 64 $1,000 a month until, retirement age pretty much. He's also talking about automation, like we're going to be losing jobs for automation. And that's the area that people are resonating with him. John Oliver on Last Week Tonight did an entire special about automation and people losing jobs to automation. And the comments section was just filled with people talking about Andrew Yang. They're like, John Oliver, you're late on the game. Andrew Yang has been talking about this for years now. And that's kind of where we are with his presidential candidacy. It's very likely that we will see him on the debate stage in June when the first presidential debate happens. However, though, and it's really a big however, I don't believe Andrew Yang is going to win the nomination. I think he's running to bring ideas to the platform. I think he's running to kind of promote himself, and perhaps this will definitely help his career. Andrew Yang might even be somebody who would end up in a cabinet position. I'm not convinced that Marianne Williamson would end up in the cabinet, but maybe somebody like Andrew Yang would, whoever the president would be, if that if they indeed did defeat Donald Trump. Because remember, this is just the Democratic primary that we're talking about. Whether it's Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, even somebody like Tulsi Gabbard winning the nomination, then they still have to defeat Donald Trump. And there's a certain senator from California that we haven't mentioned yet, and that, of course, is Kamala Harris. A lot of people are very opposed to Kamala Harris, and there are a lot of people who are just on the train for Kamala Harris. It's a very big schism in the Democratic Party. The people who are liking Bernie Sanders and the people who are liking Kamala Harris. She's definitely not as far to the left as Bernie is. Kamala Harris is kind of not exactly a center-left politician. To be honest, Kamala Harris is just the most ordinary politician out there. I mean, like when you listen to her at public speaking events, I've always described her as just lackluster. She's not that engaging of a public speaker. She's super established in, being the former Attorney General of California, as well as being a prosecutor for years and going back against her record as a prosecutor, like for example, being claiming that she never supported the death penalty when she was heavily involved with that many times during her career in California, being pro death penalty and then sort of blatantly lying on CNN during a town hall event as well. But does Kamala Harris actually stand a chance at winning the presidency? Yes, that's the reality that we all have to deal with. And when I start listening to kind of Democratic pundits, there are a lot of them that say they don't like Kamala Harris. She's too establishment. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there is a chance that she could win. And this is the big thing that I want to say the pundits are saying. They're saying that they don't like Kamala Harris, but if she won the nomination, they were like, oh, well, I don't want to vote for her, but I probably would anyway. And that's kind of brought us to the situation where the Democrats are in today. I mean, we're dealing with a wide range of ideas. Anyone from John Delaney, who's the centrist moderate, who just wants to unify America in some bipartisan way, which barely anyone is listening to all the way to somebody like Bernie Sanders, who is just going to be all about education, free healthcare. Some of his supporters demand free housing, and Bernie Sanders is, of course, one of the more extreme candidates. Only when we're dealing with the major circles, there are going to be more Democrats that are going to be running in a variety of ways. I mean, you already have so many platforms. Look what we've talked about: Marianne Williamson about the spiritual teaching side, Andrew Yang against automation, pro universal basic income, which he calls the freedom dividend, and Kamala Harris, who's just plain establishment. And then we even have some people like Kirsten Gillibrand in the race. Why is Kirsten Gillibrand running for president? Is it because she's a young mom at age 52 that says she cares about young mom issues? Is that why Kirsten Gillibrand of New York is running for president? I don't believe it for a second. If you've found your way to this far off corner of YouTube, this is probably not the first political upload you've ever listened to. When you've listened to something about the presidency, and you must have some realization that politicians work together. It's my suspicion that Kirsten Gillibrand is only running in the race to help another candidate, most likely Kamala Harris, to kind of pull votes away from someone who actually stands a chance at challenging Kamala Harris. They do this all the time, where it's like they kind of pull votes away from someone so that Kamala Harris could get a majority of the votes and will win. They put people in the races purely for strategy. Sometimes people are, running for office just way to destroy someone's campaign. You know that, and I know that. That happens. And that's what I believe Kirsten Gillibrand is all about. I don't believe that she is actually running for the presidency in any genuine way. We could do an entire upload about the conspiracy theory that Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton were in cahoots the whole time for the 2016 general election. And Bernie's all saying these things now like, oh, I won 55 counties in West Virginia, my home state, mind you. But, he didn't get the delegates and stuff like that, and that's an outrage. There's a conspiracy theory out there that Bernie was working for Hillary the whole time until the end, when there was actually a chance that he could have won the nomination. But yeah, it was just that Bernie was running to destroy all the other candidates, Martin O'Malley, Jim Webb, Lincoln Chafee, get them out of the race, and also just to prop Hillary Clinton up and kind of give her a boost. And then Bernie can energize the 18 to 25 demographic. Bernie can pull in people who have more extreme socialist views, democratic socialist views, excuse me, more extreme leftist views, and then he can endorse Hillary Clinton and pull those those voters over to her side. So it was just pure political strategy. That is a theory out there. I first heard that on the podcast, The Opperman Report, hosted by Ed Opperman, and it was in a discussion about the Tax Wall Street Party, but it was actually Ed Opperman who kind of revealed that's the kind of general theory that Bernie was in cahoots with Hillary. He was working with the Hillary Clinton campaign, and until the end, there was actually a chance when Bernie Sanders could have won the thing, so then he broke away. Well, is that really what happened? We could do an entire upload just talking about that particular subject. But I would just sort of say right now, it's probably for the best that Jeff Merkley did not run for the president. He doesn't have much to offer that Bernie wasn't already offering, and Bernie's giving you more, and then some. So what would be the point of him running? However, I do say rather that Jeff Merkley did talk a little bit more about immigration and policies, and once again, he's done a lot of interviews about that. You can find them on YouTube. But it's probably for the best that he didn't run because there are already going to be so many candidates in the race. We didn't even talk about Pete Buttigieg, the former mayor of South Bend of Indiana, who is going to be in the race. And people don't really seem to take him too seriously. All they pretty much say is he's a mayor and an openly gay candidate. Also, someone like John Hickenlooper from Colorado, they don't seem to mention him too much. Jay Inslee from Washington could be entering the race, but a lot of people aren't even really going to be listening that much to guys like that. Right now, they really just kind of want to focus on, is it going to be Bernie or not? That's what a lot of people are talking about. Will Joe Biden enter the race or not? It's kind of an interesting conversation that they're having in the Democratic Party when so many people are like, we need to get rid of the gerontocracy, that we don't need to be dominated by old white people. And yes, I do say that. I mean, like, people, I don't say that, excuse me. People are posting that on Twitter. Countless Democrats have posted that stuff on Twitter. And then, who are their top guys? Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. Joe Biden is 75, 76, and then Bernie Sanders is, of course, 77. If Bernie Sanders is sworn in as president, he would be 78 years old. If he were sworn in for a second term, he'd be 82. But someone also brought up that Nelson Mandela was 80 years old when he was president of South Africa. They're like, if Bernie's up to the job, let him have it. No, it doesn't really matter too much about a person's age or their kind of skin color. I mean, I think those things are kind of blown out of proportion. It's more like, is the person up for it? Like, is the person able to serve and complete out the term? Are they in good health? And Bernie Sanders seems like someone who isn't really backing down. He seems like he is up for this, and we do have to kind of deal with the reality right now. It is March of 2019, and it's possible that Bernie Sanders could be the next president of the United States. A lot of things would affect this. For starters, though, Hillary Clinton is not running for president again. That's another good thing. I mean, it's good in the sense that they don't need to be loading the campaign with candidates who are losers. Forgive me if I sound harsh, but if that's the harshest thing you hear today, you've had a good day. They want to talk about Hillary Clinton. They want to talk about Beto O'Rourke. They want to talk about people like Andrew Gillum and Stacey Abrams, people who did not win their election. You know, they tried. And that doesn't mean that people like O'Rourke and Gillum and Abrams are going to be done forever. No, it doesn't. But it means that maybe they shouldn't be president of the United States right now for the sole fact that they didn't win in the past. They didn't galvanize the voters. They didn't pull everybody together. They didn't run the successful campaign. And right now, the Democrats are going to be needing success. But it's purely just a strategy perspective. I mean, that's just strategy. But, you know, it's like a lot of people have talked about Beto O'Rourke also being a running mate from anybody from Elizabeth Warren to Bernie Sanders. A lot of people really like Beto O'Rourke, but once they learn more about his policies and what he's actually saying, then they don't seem to like him too much. They like him when he's playing the drums or playing the bass guitar or eating at Whataburger or riding a skateboard or something like that. They're just so enamored with like the personality that they don't actually look at his voting record. They don't actually look at, you know, him taking all that money from the fossil fuel industries. And I guess that's kind of where we are today. But anyway, Senator Jeff Merkley will not be running for president. I think it was a very good choice on this part. He's talking about taking back the Senate and defeating Donald Trump. He's put out an enormous amount of emails through his newsletter service. He is kind of basking in the spotlight. He is bathing in the sunlight. He's just taking it all in, and he enjoys being in the center stage. I've really just noticed that about Jeff Merkley so much. He really wants to run for president, and he wants to just have all eyes on him. This is back to that concept of greed that we talked about. Well, that's all for me now.